And welcome into another off-season edition of Spits and Suds. I'm Gavin Spittle of 105.3 The Fan. Huge thanks for all your feedback, for the interview that we just did with Stars President and CEO Brad Alberts, as well as the 1980 gold medal winning captain of Miracle on Ice, Mike Eruzione. If you haven't listened to those yet, give them a listen. Stick tap if you do. Some terrific nuggets in both. And today we have a good one. Joining us, a man for the last 30 years has covered the Dallas Stars, the senior staff writer for DallasStars.com. Also, the co-host of a terrific podcast called Pod Man Rush. It's the Stars podcast with Daryl Razor Ray, who we all know. It's the greatness of Mike Heika. How are you, man?
Doing great. How are you, Gavin?
I'm doing well. What does Mike Heika do in the off season for relaxation, recharging, and enjoyment?
He gets his roof redone because he got hail damage.
Oh, I did too. Yes.
Yeah, no, my whole neighborhood is every roof is pretty much getting redone, so that's taken up a lot of the time.
All right. Did you go with, like, I went with a different color? I went with black.
I did too.
Oh,
nice call. This is more my wife's call. I didn't mind it at all, but yes, several of the houses in the neighborhood are going with black, and we decided to do the same thing.
Did you go with black gutters to match, or did you?
That is, yes, what we did.
Wow, I did too. Nice. Yeah. Look at us. We're trying to be hip.
That's right.
Okay, this week on NHL.com, you wrote a great player profile. I want everyone to check it out. Either go to NHL.com if you can't find it there, DallasStars.com, or just Google Jason Robertson and hit the news on Google. And I thought this part of the write-up was spot on, and this is where I wanted to start. You write that the 2022-23 season is the perfect example of Jason Robertson's dilemma. He led the Stars in scoring with 80 points, 13 more than second-place Joe Pavelski. He led the team in power play scoring with 28 points. 6 points more than second-place Jamie Benn. He led the team in shots on goal with 231, 15 more than second-place Wyatt Johnston, and yet the feeling is the regular season was a little disappointing. I thought that was a terrific paragraph because, yes, since the goals weren't there and the points weren't as much, I feel like throughout the season people were like, what's wrong with Jason Robertson? What's wrong with Jason Robertson?
Yeah, and I think even he thought that as well. I think the coaching staff was pretty calm about it. But I mean, this is a guy who scored 40 goals in the two previous seasons, and they would like to get back to that. I mean, the biggest number to me is I think he was down 80 shots on goal per game from the previous season or per season. So that was a noticeable one. Like, why is he not shooting the puck as much? Because his time on ice was up, his power play time was there. He just wasn't shooting as much. So I think it's something we can discuss with him when we get to camp.
Do you foresee, and I know it's early, but my thinking was that maybe Wyatt Johnston moves up to the first line and pairs with Robertson and Hintz?
That's a really good dilemma. I've seen a lot of people have discussions on what their lineup would be. My biggest problem is that while that line in its iteration has done very well, I really believe the coaches like Wyatt Johnston as a center. And, you can just do a lot more things there. And I think Wyatt Johnston as a player is better there. So to me, the easy first experiment is Logan Stankoven on the right wing or Maverick Bourque, and see what happens with Robertson and Rope Hintz. I think there's a possibility he ends up there. I just think they love him at center.
One of the things I'm excited about, and the reason I was excited that they re-signed Matt Duchene was, to me, when you look at after the season when Duchene had his exit interview, I thought he was very candid, and I thought he might re-sign. Obviously, players, and you were there, Mike, but players have to say what they have to say, but he kept saying we and as a group, and it was almost like he was resigned that he was coming back. And what I thought was really interesting was him talking about going through the 2 off-season injuries, and then while in surgery, while coming back, He realizes he's no longer going to be in Nashville, has to go find a new place in Dallas, start with a new team, and basically said the first 60 or so games he was a robot. So I'm kind of excited about a Matt Duchene offseason where all those distractions are gone and he can be excited for another year in Dallas because this is the furthest he's made it in the NHL playoffs.
Yeah, one of the things that's great about Matt is he tells you exactly what's going on in his head, and it sure seems like his head is working all the time. His brain is just constantly flipping over. Did I do this right? Did I do this wrong? How can I do this better? What can I do? He will sit down and talk to you for a half hour about a game. So that's a wonderful thing for us, and I think it helps him as well. And yes, I think what happened to Joe Pavelski when he came here is that first season was a bit of an adjustment and his numbers weren't great. Then the second season, boom, he took off. Well, Duchene's numbers were actually very, very good. But the concept is that if he is comfortable and he is happy and he seems to be in both ways, that maybe even his numbers can go up. Maybe he can be a 70, 80 point guy. So, yeah, I think he could be in for a really big season.
Any word on where we are? It's been quiet in the Thomas Harley camp. And in your opinion, are we looking at a bridge deal or are we looking at a long-term deal for the Stars' young defenseman?
I think a long-term deal would put him in the 6-7 range, and I'm not sure their cap hit can handle that right now. So I almost think they have to do a bridge deal. I look at the whole Robertson thing, and we were in full panic mode back then. And then he missed almost all of camp and comes back and has the best year of his career.
Yeah.
And so I look at Thomas Harley and think if this goes through camp, it goes through camp. He's gonna be here. There's no place else for him to go. This is just in my opinion, a negotiation on potentially, 4.5, 5, 5.5, in that range. So I think it can get done fairly easily. But again, they are up against the cap as they constantly are. So I think it'll get done. I do think there's a potential he could miss some camp, but we'll wait and see.
In your 30 years of covering this team and the NHL, have you ever seen a 6/7/8 defenseman get as much attention as Nils Lundqvist?
Yes.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. The Stars have a history of doing this. Their next best defenseman is always their best defenseman. And so, it really is. I mean, go down the history of it all. I don't know how many guys who have come in here and you're like, okay, well, he's going to be the next, top pairing defenseman. And then 2 years later, he's on some other team.
Julius Heika certainly was one. Yeah.
Yeah. You just go down the list they've had several guys like this. And what I think about Nils is I like him. I think he's good. For whatever reason, and, this is just, my take on it. I think it was Pete DeBoer didn't trust him. And so, what would have been a lot better is if they brought Petrovic in earlier and trusted him, because they did seem to trust him the way they trusted Hanley. So if they could have made that move earlier in the playoffs, it would have made a big difference. But I do believe that management wants Nils Lundqvist to succeed, and they would really like the coaching staff to do everything they can to help Nils Lundqvist succeed. Now, the wild card in all of that is that Liam Bichsel is knocking on the door to do the exact same thing.
Right.
And so, I would guess that they're going to give Nils Lundqvist 40, 50 games to prove that he can be a regular. And I think there's going to be a push by management and the coaching staff to give him the opportunity to do that. And then, what happens is if Bichsel goes down into the AHL and tears it up, then he'll be up here with 20 games left in the season, and then then we could be looking at Nils again being a healthy scratch in the playoffs. So we'll see. I like him. I think he's a very talented player. I liked what he did last offseason. He added weight. He added strength. I thought he was better last season than he was the year before. But there's just that, and we've seen this too. I mean, with Alexiak, Nemeth, just a line of defensemen who didn't earn the trust of the coaching staff, and it really affected their play. and Alexiak had to go away, basically to get his brain in the right place.
Mm-hmm.
And then when he came back, he was a lot better player. So we'll see what happens with Nils. It's a really hard thing for young defensemen to not have the confidence of the coaching staff, because then you just play to not make a mistake, and that's a really hard way to play hockey.
So Tanev leaves, and he was so good with the Dallas Stars. But when you take a step back, you understand the reasoning and the length of the contract and obviously the tax situation as well. So there were numerous things. Grew up a Toronto kid. Me personally, I'm stick tapping for his time here. I'm stick tapping Jim Nill for not giving up a first-round pick for him and not really giving up too many assets to get what I felt was the best trade deadline deal. But out goes Tanev, in comes Ilya Lyubushkin, in comes Matt Dumba, in comes Brendan Smith. How do you look at this six pairing and where it all fits in, and did they do enough to replace a Chris Tanev?
Well, it's a really good question. I think they did enough that they're in a as good or better place than they were at the start of last season. And so if you look at Hakanpää and you look at Ryan Suter, they've replaced that. Now, it's really hard to replace a Chris Tanev, but you can do that in February or March. And so my thought process is this group is better than the group that started last season, and with the potential for Bixel, even being better. They're in a really good place. The question becomes, who fits where and how does this all come together? In my mind, Thomas Harley plays with Heiskanen. Heiskanen plays the right side, and then you start shuffling the next pairs. I mean, my guess would be Esa Lindell and Dumba, because Dumba is a top four defenseman. He's been a top four defenseman his entire career. Lyubushkin, to me, is a third pairing defenseman, and I don't really know what to make of him. I don't particularly understand the contract when you think of what they gave Hakanpää. I mean, like if you look at a healthy Hakanpää, like at the beginning of last season, his numbers are better than Lyubushkin's. So now Lyubushkin's supposed to be very physical, very mean. Hakanpää could block shots and make hits, but I don't think he was ever mean.
Yes.
So maybe they want that element. And again, same thing with Dumba. Maybe they want that mean element, that dirty, quote unquote, element that can actually help your team. And maybe that's what these two guys will bring. But I do think the group of defensemen is going to be a very interesting ride. I don't mind Brendan Smith, but he is older. And, I look at him like Petrovic or Hanley, where he's a good guy who can be your seventh. And then if you have to put Brendan Smith in the lineup, you're not worried. Like you can go, boom, there's an NHL defenseman. So yeah. I think that's a good thing. And then it's just a matter of sorting it all out and finding what pairs match and how you want to play this. I mean, it does, if you trust Nils and you trust Lyubushkin and Dumba, it gives you the option to play Heiskanen on his left side, which I think a lot of fans would like to try for 20 or 30 games just to see if he's better.
I agree, Mike, in that Lyubushkin is certainly very physical, as is a very fresh Matt Dumba, and we'll see coming off of last year where he was in Arizona and then Tampa. Interesting to see how he fits in this lineup, because I felt as though, there might have been a little bit of a wear down, but that happens when you play defending Stanley Cup champions in Vegas and then the year prior against, Colorado. So 2 in a row, and then you're facing Connor McDavid and the run they were on, being one of the best teams in the NHL since January. That said, I've always wanted this team to be a little bit more physical. What are your thoughts on the whole physicality aspect of this Stars team, especially toward the playoffs?
Yeah, I agree 100%. I thought Chris Tanev gave you a little bit of that, but, not over the top physicality, more like warrior, more almost mental strength than physical. But yeah, I think if these two guys have that element, and then the wild card is Bixel. I mean, if you've ever seen him, he's a massive human being. I saw him in Traverse City, and he hit one of the Detroit Red Wings prospects. And obviously, when Detroit plays, it's all Detroit, and the fans are going crazy and everything. And he hit one early, and they booed him every shift the rest of that game last season in the Traverse City tournament, and he loved it.
Yeah.
He ate it up. He was like, yeah, come on, bring it on. So that could be your physical element. And it would be great if he is that guy, and he's 21 years old, because he could be something for quite some time. But yes, I do think that element has been added to the blue line, and I haven't asked anybody. I should, but I do wonder if that was intentional. I want to talk to Pete and say, how do you see this group of defensemen? How do you see it shaken up? Lefty, righty, physicality.
Yeah.
What is Lyubushkin? Is he more than a third pairing defenseman? Could he, slide up and play? Although I don't think he has to either, because this is a group that plays three pairs pretty consistently.
We get a lot of feedback on Spits and Suds, and one of the things that a lot of people have an opinion, I just want to see Miro on his strong side. And you talked about that pairing. I think it's going to be the same pairing. What are your thoughts, and have you asked when you're in the locker room about Miro's quote-unquote strong side? And I'll also add, I asked Craig, as a former defenseman, Craig Ludwig, on this show, and he said, all things, these guys are so talented, it's not that much of a difference maker.
That's what they say. I'm not smart enough. I'm not Craig Ludwig, so I don't have that history. But I do notice that. So when the Stars had no centers and Jamie Benn had to play center, Jamie Benn was an excellent center. He was very good. And Joe Newendike said, look, you can't just go trade for a number one center. You just can't do it. And so then Jim Nill comes in and he trades for a number one center. And he moves Jamie Benn to the left side. And Jamie Benn was a first-team All-Star twice over a span of 3 years. That is the only – those were the first time, because now Robertson has done it. But those were the only first-team All-Stars in franchise history. Yes, Jamie Benn was a good center. He was a first-team All-Star at left wing. So I do think there is something to be said for excuse me, if you put a player in the perfect spot where he's supposed to be and you give him the right partner, then maybe Miro could be even better. Because as much as we love Miro, his numbers are never going to win a Norris Trophy.
Right.
If that's what you think he should do. And I do wonder if that part of that is because he plays the right side. Now, that being said, he's their hands down best defenseman, even if he is playing on the right side.
Yeah.
So there's absolutely nothing wrong with using him there. And every coaching staff continues to use him there and say it's fine. And he said it's fine. But I look at when you can use the entire ice, when you can open up and see and make that cross ice pass and not have to be hemmed up against the board to try and throw bounce passes or open yourself up, to throw a pass. It seems like his brain and the way that it functions to give him that extra tick of a second to put him in a better position to pass the puck, to make a good breakout. I would like to see it for, like I said, 20, 30, 40 games and see if he's better.
I think there is something. Yeah, I agree with you, Mike. I think there's something to be said for that free Miro, and but that other side is not, easy to find. I mean, for instance, Cale Makar clearly has the freedom to fly around the ice, but he's next to Devin Taves, and that has a lot to do with it as well. So when you have and that term shutdown defenseman no longer applies, but basically a bigger defenseman, a more defensive defenseman, that clearly helps. And I don't know if Thomas Harley's at that point.
No, and of course he plays the left side too. So, that's the moot point. It almost have to be Nils Lundqvist, or, if you think Dumba can handle that role, I'm not sure he can. Chris Tanev was supposed to be that guy, but they didn't really even try him. It's hard to find a really good right-handed defenseman who could play with Miro Heiskanen.
Yeah.
So,
and Chris,
and then
I'm sorry, go Mike.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, and Chris Tanev upon his arrival, certainly paired well. I agree with you. I thought he was going to be with Miro, but at the same time, I thought Esa Lindell played really well in a pairing with Tanev.
Yeah, then that's why I think he might play with Dumba this time, and those two will be together in Harley and Haskin. But we'll see.
Yeah. All right, so take us inside. I mean, when you look at the statistics of Jake Oettinger, it was a good year, but I think Jake wants to be, among the top 4 goalies. Is that a correct assessment that, a little bit injured throughout the year? And, this is, to me, a big year for Jake. And what are your thoughts?
Yeah, 100%. I think when you look at the regular season and the injuries, his numbers were really down. Like, I mean, significantly down from what they were the previous regular season. That being said, his numbers in the playoffs were significantly better.
Yep.
So now I just think it was a real mental roller coaster for him. And he even told us that at times that, like, uh, he's funny because he'll tell you, oh, I'm happy for the people who believe in me, my family, my coaches, because I think at times he thought that nobody else believed in him. And that's a hard thing to go through for a goalie. And so the fact that he did go through that, I think he, was much better in the playoffs. Even the Edmonton series, I don't think he was terrible.
You're right.
So, it's not like he lost it.
Yeah.
They just didn't score any goals. So all of that should help his mental state moving forward. The hope is that he's 100% healthy and has a good off season. And then the other is he's 25 years old.
Yeah.
Like, I think Marty was just becoming a number 1 goalie at 25. And he's, Jake's got 3.5 seasons under his belt already, and 2 long playoff runs. So I think he's in a great place to become a premier NHL goalie. The other interesting thing, and there's a lot of candidates to be in that mix, but you have a couple of international competitions where the U.S. goalies, are going to be really fighting each other to get one of those spots. And I do think that's something he wants. And so I don't mind having that carrot out there for him to say, you know what, I'm one of the top 3 U.S. goalies in the world. Because that's pretty high ranking right now with the top 3 U.S. goalies.
Yeah, I have also cited Connor Hellebuck had a down year, I think right around 2018, 2019, and clearly he's had a big bounce back. But then we look at Connor Hellebuck in the playoffs, and, Colorado took care of them, no problem. I thought that was going to be a much tougher series. Okay, off-season, Mike Heika, have you picked up the makeup kit for all the work you'll be doing on Victory Plus?
I'm not sure that I'm the face that they want
Come
on Victory
on.
Plus. I would be happy to help if they need me. It's going to be fun. I will say that it's just a blank canvas.
Yep.
I don't know so just an insight into my day. I'll go to the rink for the morning skate. We'll cut probably 3 videos of players, just, little 2-minute interviews, and, put those up on the website. Well, all of that obviously is, potential to now go on to the streaming. And then 2, what else could we do? Could we sit down and, have an interview with one of the assistant coaches? Could we, could Brian and Sevy and me just have a little confab, at noon that would preview the game? There's just a lot of different opportunities. And their biggest goal right now is to get a good game cast on the air and moving in the right direction. And so I think all the extra stuff is going to, be pushed to the side potentially. But I do believe in the span of the season, any idea is a good idea. And so we're going to see some things that I think will be great for the fans. Will be fun for me because I like doing that stuff. Fun for Razor because I think the reason we have the podcast is because Razor wanted, more opportunity to talk to the fans. And this is, again, something that he could do on a game day, which if you're working in the media, or even if you're a player, the time between 11 or 12 and game time is boring. And so we got nothing. And if, we have an opportunity to use that time to do something that's fun and creative for either pregame or off day, I think we're going to try and do that.
So one of the things that we see is the Jamie Benn occasional post-game interview and very quiet and short answers. As a man who has just spent so much time, probably. All right, 2 quick things, Mike. Is there a beat reporter in the NHL that's covered a single team more than you?
That's a good question.
I don't think there is.
I don't think there is. I never have really thought about it.
Yes.
Um, oh gosh.
By the way, you are a future Dallas Stars Hall of Famer.
Oh, thanks. We'll see about that.
No, you should be. 30 years
I,
covering one team. It's amazing.
I tell Razor that he's the next one, and we're both on the board. So we say, well, we're going to kibosh either one.
Okay. So if you're on the board, Craig Ludwig, let's get him in. If not, put his shin pads in. Come on.
I think Craig should go in, to tell you the truth.
I do too.
It's a process, and
okay.
I mean, it's funny because even Brendan, and I love Brendan. Brendan doesn't have the numbers that Marty has, and so you're like, okay, is this about what was his, impact as captain and everything else, or do you sit there and look and say Marty Turco was a top 3 goalie for 4 or 5 years in the NHL? And should that be, a big part of the vote? So it's a great one. I love the Hall of Fame. And then 2, I think we have a lot of great candidates. So we'll see. I think Craig should be considered, especially with, what he's done in the broadcast and the, in coaching and helping young defensemen and youth hockey. And there's a lot of reasons Craig Ludwig should be in there.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. All right. So dealing with Jamie Benn day after day like you do, because, you're on the road with the team. You spend so much time, around these players. Do you see a different side of Jamie Benn that maybe we don't see?
Yes. In my opinion, I've never actually asked him this. Tom Holy and me are good friends, and we both think he does it on purpose. He does it just to be difficult because he thinks, I don't know what he thinks. I don't know if he thinks it's funny or if emotionally he really does have a hard time dealing with the loss or any of that kind of stuff. But when you just talk to Jamie, he's so funny, such a nice guy. There's a great scene in A Knight's Tale where William's getting just pelted with vegetables from the people where he's in the stockade. And the king walks up to him and says, "Your men love you. If I knew nothing else, that would be enough." And that reminds me of Jamie Benn. His men love him.
Nice.
And that should be enough.
So people were talking about what Brad Albert said when I asked him about the qualification to go up into the rafters. Stars have always been really tight-knit about this. And I brought up Jamie Benn, and he talked about, while it's not a deciding factor, he feels as though a Stanley Cup certainly propels you to that level, as well as length with a club. What are your thoughts on Jamie Benn going up there eventually?
I think he's already up. That's just me. I know Brad's going to say what Brad's going to say, but he's second in pretty much every single statistical category in franchise history. And if you ask me, Jamie Benn's number will be retired whenever he decides to hang him up. That being said, a Stanley Cup would be great. You look at Dirk, you look at Mike Modano, and people look at them differently because they have won a championship. And, I don't know, maybe they both would have statues anyway. But the fact that you did what you did, you're the greatest player in franchise history, and you won a championship, that's what gets you statues.
Is there a favorite player over the years that you really enjoyed dealing with?
Craig, honest and truly.
Really?
Hands down. So I live in the 817, and I worked for the Star Telegram when the team came down here. Craig is the only player who moved to the 817. And so we kind of knew each other. We knew the same places. We hung out sometimes. And then 2, he is one of the greatest interviews ever. I'll go back to, and I don't think I actually printed it, but I think it was 99, the Red Wings traded for Chris Chelios, Wendell Clark, and somebody else, and the Stars got nobody at the trade deadline. And so I'm going around talking, and people won't talk to me. They're like, yeah, no comment. I don't want to talk about that. And Craig goes, "Holy crap." He goes, "Chris Chelios." He goes, "I played with Chris Chelios. He's really good." He used saltier language than that. But it was funny because he was like, you know what? They got better. It's on us to really, up our game because the Red Wings, I think they may have been the defending Cup champs at the time. They got better.
Yeah.
And we have to play better now if we want to win this championship. And that's Craig. I mean, that's who he is. He's no BS. And then he's just so much fun to watch play. I remember here's another one story. So him and Carbo were obviously great friends. And one guy, I can't remember who it was, a big guy for another team, just boards Carbo, just runs him into the end boards because Carbo's defending as a center in the defensive zone. And Luds skated up behind him, grabbed him by the back of the collar, lifted him off his skates, and threw him on his back. And I'm like, whoa, so that sends a message right there.
Yeah.
And I don't think he even knew what he was doing. It was just, he just reacted. Like, you don't do that. You don't board, 39, 40-year-old man. And, it was one of the great scenes of my career, just watching him. He's been fantastic. And I love that he's still around here and he's still doing stuff.
Yeah. I also wonder, Mike, because Craig's very self-deprecating.
Yes.
At the same time, when you look, 2-time national champion for North Dakota. I don't know why he's not in the North Dakota Hall of Fame. And then 17 years in the league, 2 Stanley Cups. That's a heck of a run.
It is.
But for some reason, it's just interesting because everyone just knows him as Luds. Maybe it's just because he's riding around in the Harley. And I've always looked at Craig as, he just wants to be with the people.
Yes.
And that's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
And he loves to tell stories and he loves to put on a show. And I'll tell you real quick, Mike, also, like, we do charity dinners and Craig's thing is like, all right, get ready. Cause I'm going to totally pigeon you for 3 hours. So I just sit there and take Craig for 3 hours. It's an absolute beating. I've learned to deal with it. But at the same time, it is truly amazing that he can hold court to the point where a woman came up, she'd had a few Frosties, and she said, "Can I have your autograph?" And Craig's like, "Sure." And she goes, "You're Brett Hull, right?" And he goes, "Absolutely." And he signs it as Brett Hull.
Brett Hull.
And so we were all laughing. He goes, "Guys, that's not the first time." He goes, "There are plenty of Brett Hull autographs out there that is from me."
Are you aware of Lucky, his 3-legged dog?
Yes. Well, I am because I have a paralyzed dog. So I have a 3-legged dog. So I have him in a wheelchair. So yes, we bond over that. But please tell us about Lucky.
Well, I just think that says everything you need to know about Craig.
Yeah.
Like, here's this guy who's rough and tough and will beat anybody up that it gets in your way. And yet he has a soft heart for kids, for animals, for charity, he's just the nicest guy in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. I wish I'd see a little bit more of that niceness. I took him to what's that?
I'll give you this one. So Jen Floyd starts covering the Stars when I'm at the Star Telegram and I moved to the morning news. And she's walking in the locker room in Irving there. And Richard Maffichuk just thwacks her across the back of the leg with his stick as we're walking off the ice after practice. And she's like, "Whoa, oh, what was that for?" And she was really insulted and thought it was, I said, "That means he likes you."
Yeah.
If he trusts you to hit you on the back of the legs with his stick, that means he likes you. And if Craig Ludwig trusts you to take whatever insults he has to throw at you, that means he likes you.
The Stars alumni was playing against SMU at the Star Center in Farmers Branch, and I went to support Craig, and I went to the bar they have afterwards, a little private area. And, Mike, I would encourage you and anyone else. I mean, one of the great things and one of the reasons I'm very jealous of all your years in hockey, the best stories. I mean, it's absolutely amazing, and the chirping back and forth. It's just nonstop.
Yes. And then the fact that he played with, Bob Gainey and Chris Chelios and played in Montreal. And I mean, it's like he's had a wonderful life already. So he's got more to go.
Do you think the Stars will have a Joe Pavelski night this upcoming year?
They should.
Yeah.
I'm very curious as to see what Joe Pavelski wants to do post hockey. but he is one of the great leaders that I've seen. And so, if they can somehow bring that into the organization, if Joe's willing to do that, then it makes complete sense. And then, yeah, honor him, bring him in, say, hey, he's going to be a special assistant to the GM, whatever. But yeah, I definitely think they should honor him. And clearly, the majority of his career is in San Jose. He's gonna have one of those too.
One of the guys that I have my eye on as well, I was fortunate enough to interview him early in the year, and it was a really, really good in-depth, and you could just tell how dialed in he was Rich Peverly and his role with the organization.
Yeah, he is one of the bright minds of the future. I give him a hard time, call him a future GM. It's a hard path to become a future GM.
Yeah.
And what I like about Rich is that he concentrates on what his job is, and he's not trying to get the next job. He's just trying to do this one as well as he can. But he is a very bright mind. What I like about him most is his honesty with coaches, his honesty with players, prospects. He tells it like it is, and he has no problem with that. And I think that's a really good trait to have in a guy in your organization.
Is the passport updated to go to Finland?
It's updated. I have never. It's funny because my wife and daughter have been over to Europe. I have never been overseas.
Okay.
So I'm kind of curious to how all this works, and if they need me, if they want me, how that all works. And my actual surname is Finnish. So I'd be kind of
Really?
curious. Yeah, I used to have Heikka, and so I'd be kind of curious to see what the history is over there. And but it's a fairly short trip, so
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
All right.
Get over there and see what happens.
So before the 30 years, had you covered hockey prior?
No, I grew up in Michigan, so I liked hockey growing up. I did not play. I played shinny, but it was too expensive. My family could not afford the league fees because you still have to pay ice fees and equipment fees. So I played basketball growing up: basketball, football, baseball.
Got it.
And then when I came down here in '83, I just started covering high schools, colleges, and when the team came, or when it was announced the team was going to come in '93, they said, does anybody here know anything about hockey? And I said, yes, I do. And so I went up to Minnesota for the last month. Then I came down here. They said I was too young to have a beat. So they had another guy cover it for the first year. And then in '94, '95, I started full time.
Wow.
So
what a run.
It's been good. I'm very I have 8 brothers and sisters, and I always tell the story. So my brother-in-law said, like, do you get discounted tickets? And I'm like, they actually pay me to be at the game. So it's a great life. We're all very lucky, that we get to do this kind of stuff.
Okay, so finally, 8 brothers and sisters. Euchre, do you guys play? And
oh my gosh, we love euchre.
Okay, euchre.
So
and are you
when I go up in the when I go up in the summertime, we have euchre tournaments.
Okay, so you have euchre tournaments. Let me throw another one out there. Werner's Ginger Ale.
Love Werner's Ginger Ale.
All right.
They used to give away better made potato chips at the Tigers game. So we always thought they were like the greatest potato chips ever because they're from Detroit.
Oh,
and Stroh's beer, of course.
Wow. Yeah, that old Tiger Stadium with the dark blue, the short porch, the Cecil Fielder, just so many.
72 All-Star game, all of it.
So many great memories, growing up and watching. Boy, that place was a house of horrors at times. Yeah, that place, when you went, like if that place was rocking, it would shake, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
It was, but then again, so does the A&M press box when you're there. So these old buildings weren't that strong.
All right. I just keep coming up with these questions. Best barn that you visit?
So the one that I miss the most is Maple Leaf Gardens. It just had so much history in it, and it's in downtown Toronto. It's fabulous. Currently, it's an interesting question. There's so many of the new ones that are so big that it's hard to get the old feel to it. I used to tell Matt DeFranks this. I honestly think that the American Airlines Center is the Ritz-Carlton of hockey arenas. Like it's you feel like you're in an old hockey arena. And I love the place. I really do. I think it's one of the best arenas in
It
hockey. And
is,
then
yeah.
when it gets revved up during the playoffs, it's fantastic.
What I tell listeners too is if they ask my opinion about road trips, I think Vegas is really good.
Oh yeah,
But
wonderful.
I would also say do not sleep on the Tampa, Florida, or Florida, Tampa, because you can, it's a beautiful drive. Say you start in Tampa, you see Stars Lightning, then you go through the Florida Everglades. If the Florida Everblades are playing in the ECHL, you can check them out. But if not, you just drive right through the Everglades, and then coming upon you is sunrise to see the Florida Panthers. And usually there's a day off in between, and you can go down to Fort Lauderdale if you want. So, I mean, the Canadian road trips are awesome, but to me, that's kind of a hidden gem because you get the weather and, a couple of nice arenas and, you get to see some sights in Florida as well.
Yeah, I agree. And when we stay there, we stay at Fort Lauderdale right on the beach. And that's a pretty nice place to stay.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. The podcast is called Podman Rush. When can we see that thing kick up? Is it going to kick up again in training camp?
That's a good question. It's all Daryl Ray run. I am the Ed McMahon for old people, Andy Richter for newer people. Whatever Daryl wants to do, that's what we do. I try and help out in any way I can, and just try and be an assist man whenever I can.
Nice.
It'll be interesting to see if we do have the opportunity to use the streaming if we start doing it on camera, or
Yeah.
more of an ESPN type focus. So I think it's something that's being discussed right now.
I think it would be terrific. Absolutely. Let's aggregate that Victory Plus with a lot of Stars content, even like pregame skate, where you can just, put up, you don't even need an announcer, just put up the players skating around and shooting and just put up stats while you're focused on them.
And fans love that just because they pick up different things in watching them skate,
yes,
watching them shoot, watching them do whatever drills they're doing. It would be great. And then we shoot, our camera guys shoot a ton of stuff that never gets to be seen. So I think, if we have a place to put all that, it'd be wonderful.
All right, Mike Heika, you're a beast. 30 years covering the Dallas Stars. The podcast is Podman Rush. He's putting out articles even in this off season. Go follow him on Twitter. Also, you can check out DallasStars.com, where he is the senior staff writer. Thank you for taking the time. I really appreciate this conversation, and hopefully we can do it again and soon and see each other in person.
Yeah, it's always fun, Gavin. I would be happy to do it anytime you want. Get Ludwig on here. What is he, just off at the motorcycle thing in North Dakota or whatever?
He's actually in Wisconsin. I think he's coming back soon. I text him, and he never texts me back. I'll text him a nice picture, and he'll text me back something that's just cannot be broadcast on the airwaves. That's the
that means he likes you.
Yeah, I suppose so. In the meantime, it's the greatness of Sean Shapiro and and others. So it's a lot of fun. But thanks again, Mike. I appreciate it.
All right, we'll talk to you soon.
All right, and thanks to every one of you for listening to Spits and Suds. We'll have another episode soon right here on 105.3 The Fan. Have a great day, everyone.